Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the Port in the Storm, How You Can Support LGBTQ plus Youth webinar. My name is Beth Yates. I am the Children's Consultant from the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Office, and I will be the host and the question moderator for today. And our presenter today is Jayne Walters. Jayne is currently the Director of Education and a board member for Indy Pride. Jayne is the first openly transgender manager in the history of the Indianapolis Public Library and is an advocate for and a regular speaker and writer on the topic of LGBTQ plus issues and libraries. And we are so lucky to have her here today. Clearly from the registration, we know that this is a topic that's at the top of a lot of people's minds. A couple more announcements before we get started. To register for other webinars or other trainings available from the Professional Development Office, please see the Indiana State Library's events calendar, which can be found on our website at www.in.gov/library, and then it's under Services for Libraries. This session is 1 hour, and you're eligible to receive 1 LEU for this presentation. If you're watching a recording of this webinar, instructions on how to obtain your LEU are in the video's description on YouTube. Or you can find those instructions on the Indiana State Library's Continuing Education website under LEU policies. But in short, when you watch a recording, your director or someone in HR or otherwise designated by administration should create a certificate for you, as they are the ones who can verify that you watched. Okay, it's enough of me. I think we are ready to get started. Again, today, our presenter is Jayne Walters. Take it away, Jayne.
Thank you so much, Beth. Welcome, everybody. Like Beth had said, we have a lot of questions. Normally, I have a whole stack of slides that have why this is important and everything else like that. But I think that a lot of people, they already know a lot of the issues that are going on and why these are important. And that's why you're here. So I am going to be changing it up a bit. There'll be far fewer slides. There will be just a little bit at the very beginning, but for the most part, I'm going to dive pretty much right into questions. We had a lot of really great ones, and then hopefully I can get to yours as well, because everybody has their own individual experiences going on within their own library systems. So to start off with, these are my cats, because of course I have to have cats, and they are always trying to help me when I'm putting these things together by walking across my keyboard, trying to chew on the corner of my laptop, and all those sorts of fun things. So in 2022, just last year, there were 190 anti-LGBTQ plus legislation bills. And this year, it's over 540. So there's been a huge jump. It's become very evident that there is a concerted effort to attack this community and in a lot of ways the kids that are a part of it. They tend to be the ones that are first targeted before they start going after adults. There's kind of a playbook that they go by where they go after the trans youth playing sports, and then they go after just affirming care for trans kids, and then they go after affirming care for adults, and in the midst of all of that, they go after drag queens, and they go after material that we're giving to kids and calling it harmful, which it's not, and we all know it's not. So other students aren't the only problem that kids are facing in school. They're also getting a lot of it from teachers and school staff. And this is where some of you that are in the schools can really help by being the ones that are shutting that down when you hear other staff and teachers saying those sorts of things. It's increased. Just in 2 years, it increased from 52.4% to 58%. And it's, like I said, we all know it's getting bad. We all know it's getting worse. So I'm going to just kind of keep moving along and then we will get to questions. These are all really great. This is all really great information that you can find in the National School Climate Survey by Gleason, and it's on their website. So I highly recommend checking it out and reading it. You can also use it to help with your arguments when fighting for these kids, which I will discuss more later. So I'm going to jump in just right into the questions, and I'm going to keep this up so that everybody can kind of watch this while we talk about some hard things to talk about. So I don't have names to these questions. So all of these for me, they're anonymous. So they may apply to you directly. They may be your question. They might not apply to you directly right now, but maybe you'll find them useful later on. So the first one is, my local elementary school teachers have been ordered to take down all pride flags from their classrooms. As a public librarian, I would like to offer support to both these teachers and their students. Do you have any ideas about what resources or support the public library can offer to increase representation for the LGBTQ plus community in their classrooms? So pins for one. These are little signs. Stickers. I have stickers on my mug, on the back of my laptop, that sort of thing. They're small enough a lot of times that the casual person walking by, they don't notice them. But for a kid that is part of this community, it is that beacon. It is that lighthouse, like in the dark, and they see it and they focus on it. When I very first started here, I have this little ribbon just on my water mug, and I would be sitting at the reference desk and kids would walk by other people to ask me a question, and it wouldn't even be LGBTQ related, but they could see just by these little tiny signs that I had that I was an ally if I wasn't already family. And so those little things really, really help. So that is one way that you can do that. And another way that you can offer your support for the teachers and the students is, especially in the schools, is by helping to push other people to go into being on the school board, showing up at the school board meetings and speaking out against these things that are happening. And by showing, the more folks that show up and speak out to support, the better. Because far too often, it's only a handful of people that show up at these things. They cause enough ruckus that then folks cave. And so the key is to fight back against that with louder, more sensible voices. So the next question is, as a librarian in Indiana, which is currently working to pass bills that will charge librarians with felonies and providing minors with harmful materials, they define harmful as anything to do with sexuality, against the status quo, or lacking literary merit. How can I continue to show up for my LGBTQ youth? Is there any way I can continue to provide programs they have specifically requested, like Pride Month Book Club? This is kind of a difficult one because it does get into legalese, and the legalese that is used in it, a material must fall into 3 different categories. And it has to actually be in all 3. If it's not in all 3, then it is not considered a material that is harmful for children. That is where having the processes in place for people that want to have an item disputed or reconsidered for the collection, having those in place are very important, because they will look at those 3 things when evaluating an item to determine whether it is actually harmful material. But there are less obvious ways of actually doing it than having a Pride Month book club. Calling it something other than Pride Month book club, for one, you could just call it a book club. As a public library, we will regularly do a banned book display. And it gets a lot of discussion from adults. They're like, they banned this, they banned that. Why? And it's all because it's always the really off the wall things that people have tried to ban, like Where's Waldo and just different things like that. And people get really worked up about it when they see that stuff that they like has been banned or been challenged. And so by engaging in those conversations, it's a good way to throw something out there like, yeah, we're talking about having a banned book club to read and analyze the material, discuss the story, the plot, character growth, why people might have a problem with the book, that sort of thing. So by engaging in those conversations and getting them involved too in them, you can kind of build allies that way that you wouldn't have expected. The next question is, we have parents who don't feel books about LGBTQ plus represent their conservative community and that their kids shouldn't be exposed to them. How would you handle these situations? One of the first things that I start off with, because I've run into this with certain people, is I ask them, would they want someone telling them that their child can't read the Bible? No. So how you phrase it though is more like this. It's like, as a library, we don't believe that the government should dictate what someone is allowed to read. Or the government has no place in telling a parent what their child isn't allowed to read. That's a parent's choice. And things like, we offer a wide range of material for everyone because we have people that need access to books and we believe in their rights to choose what they deem appropriate or not for their own children. By pulling in language that they often use themselves in fighting against people, you're then speaking their language. You're talking about their rights being taken away. You're talking about their right as a parent being taken away to dictate. You're talking about the government deciding for them what their kid can read rather than themselves. Because you can't come at them with this is a book that's important to everybody. You're just talking to a brick wall then. You have to speak their language to them to be able to get them to understand from their side what you are actually doing. The next question is, I work at a public library, but I am school board member for the local corporation. I am interested to know what I could do to help teens from either position. My library position is not directly related to our youth, and we do not have a large group of teens that come in and stay. I believe our materials are used heavily. I advocate on school board with policy when I can, but I think there's a lot that isn't known about what goes on in the schools and what our teens struggle with. Now, as I showed before, I showed some stats from Gleason, which is a fantastic resource, and it's just glsen.org. That's where you can go to get information from them. You can find posters, all sorts of great data can be found there. It is the way to go for starting the conversation at a board level. They do a national school climate survey. That's where I pulled the information in, and that information is very eye-opening. The 2021 one is currently available on their website, but they also have the resources for doing your own local school climate survey. And that is someplace that I would definitely start, especially if you are on the school board or if you're wanting to get the school board to recognize. It's a really great way to go. And for the local, you can eventually find the local school climate survey on their website. But if you want the URL just to go right to it, it's local survey, all one word, .Gleason, GLSEN.org. How can we safely advertise LGBTQIA plus programming such as Pride events in order to reach youth, but without drawing so much negative attention that the space then becomes unsafe for both patrons and staff? Is it possible? Yes, it is possible. We're actually kind of dealing that with our own library system right now because our drag story hour is coming back, and I was like, how are we going to do this? Do we want to broadcast it out loud a lot to everybody? We want to get the attendance, but how do we do that without bringing in all the negative as well? It's difficult, but there are ways to do it. And soft marketing is a really good way to approach this. By reaching out to known allies, like our library system reached out to Indy Pride, which I'm a part of. So that kind of made it a little bit easier for them since I'm sort of the liaison between the two. But you can reach out to your local Pride organization. You can spread the word through those allies. You can market it in places that are LGBTQ friendly, that a lot of people that are going to oppose these programs, they wouldn't be in, they wouldn't go there. They're not going to see it. So by doing this sort of soft marketing, you can get that out to everybody. And you can also reach out and ask for folks to simply attend, to be kind of a barrier between the negative folks and those that are there to just enjoy the program. There was one not that long ago in Bloomington in which there was a big outcry about a drag story hour that was going to be going on. And a whole bunch of people came out just to put themselves between the story hour folks and whoever showed up to oppose it. And a lot of times it is just a lot of bark and no bite, because in that case, I think there were only about like 10 people that showed up to oppose it, while there were over 100 allies and supporters. So that is a way that you can do that by just doing that sort of subtle soft marketing. We are waiting to put up our posters until just about a week or two before the actual event. So that's a way that we're doing it internally, quietly. But it still needs to get out there, and that's how you can rely on your allies. You can rely on those community contacts that you have to sort of spread the word and get it to the right people that are going to be supportive. Best practices for making collections open and accessible while protecting the privacy of timid kids who want to browse for LGBTQ materials. That's a wonderful question, because a lot of times when you have the sections completely separated out, if a kid wants to look at it, then they're standing right there in front of it. And so they're going to be seen standing right there in front of it. And everybody's going to notice. And then doesn't matter if they just stop briefly to look there, then they're going to get picked on, then they're going to get teased and all that kind of thing. That's why labeling the books is also bad, because while these are a spotlight to those that are really wanting and needing an ally wherever it is that they're going, a spine label that labels the book as being LGBTQ, those bullies, they will see that when that kid walks out of the library with a book that has that on it. And because those kids are already always being under constant scrutiny for the slightest little thing to pick on. So what we do here is we place our new LGBTQ plus stuff out on display, but as newer stuff comes in, that stuff then just gets filed in with everything else. That way they can browse for anything they want without specifically standing in front of an LGBTQ section. You can also create little handouts that have a variety of topics and authors on the same sheet. That's another good way. That way that you're giving the same sheet to all the kids, but the kids that are needing that specific information, they've got it on theirs, and then they'll know. But not everybody knows that they're looking at that for that. Another way is if you know some of the terms like Sapphic, that's a perfect example of letting them know that kind of, sort of the lingo of what they're talking about, because Sapphic is one that is it's basically women loving women. But it's not a really super well-known term among adults and things like that. It's one of those ones that has kind of made its way in through anime and fan fiction and all that sort of stuff. And so that's a great one that kids that might be out there reading, original content and stories that, friends are writing and posting on websites and stuff, they'll understand that. So if they come to you and they're asking you about like trying to find a book and that sort of thing, and they're kind of hemming and hawing around it, you can sort of just throw that term in with a bunch of other just more general ones. Like, are you looking for something action adventure? Are you looking for something mystery? Are you looking for something sapphic? Are you looking for something sporty? Are you looking for, just kind of toss it in there casually? And you'll be surprised how many kids, like when you say that word, their eyes light up like, oh my God, you know that term kind of thing. So that is a really good way too, to kind of make that connection with them. So next, I work in a conservative community where some patrons feel comfortable saying things like, I don't want any of that alphabet stuff, or wow, the library celebrates pride, with a tone. Many times it is just an offhand comment, and I find those to be harder than the straight up complaints. Is there a way to address this politely and make it clear that it is not okay, as it does not contribute to the welcoming atmosphere the library is trying to cultivate? I have to be honest, I can tend to be a little sarcastic in moments like that. And I'll play dumb sometimes. It's like, if they're like, I don't want any of that alphabet stuff, no ABC books, got it. Stuff like that. And they're just like, it's like, you want to be dumb? I can be dumb right back. And I try not to do it sometimes, but it just sort of naturally comes out a lot of times. But honestly, when they're saying things like, wow, the library celebrates pride, and they get an attitude about it, or they have a tone about it, it's like, yeah, we do. We celebrate many of the holidays and celebrations because we're actively trying to make the space a welcome and safe one. Just let them know. It's like, that's how you do it. It is hard sometimes to have those offhanded comments because you want to just kind of like pounce sometimes on it, but you can't. You really can't. So just being very as calm and as casual about it as you possibly can when interacting with it. You just have to let it sort of roll off, because what they're doing is they're just trying to start a fight. They're just trying to start something. They want to irritate you. It's how most passive aggressiveness tends to be. It's just as bad as backhanded compliments, that sort of thing. They're looking to get a dig in, and you just can't. Just take a breath and walk away. Which is really, really hard. It is, and I know it. So the next one, this one's from Wyoming. I am a Wyoming librarian, and we have been facing potential hate speech for 2 years because that is the norm in our small town, small-minded community. I've been there. We used to have our policies based on WLA/ALA Freedom of Information and Non-Discrimination Acts. The community is trying to make us unaffiliated from ALA because they don't like that we have books that are LGBTQIA plus friendly in YA and the children's department. It is really sad how ignorant our population is. What advice do you have for librarians who deal with being challenged for being too inclusive and not discriminating or censoring? Much like the last one, don't engage. They're looking for a fight. Don't argue with them. You're just going to be feeding the trolls. Make sure you have a selection policy and a formal reconsideration request process that you can direct them to. I'm sorry you feel that way. You're more than welcome to fill out a formal reconsideration request form and I'll pass it along and then have them print it out and just hand it right to them and give it to them right there. I'll make sure it gets to the right person. You don't need to step in front of the shield. That is your shield. You don't need to put yourself in front of it. You don't need to engage with them. You don't need to get into an argument with them. You have that protection in place. Those policies are there for a reason. And you could just deflect and go right to it. Sorry you feel that way. Here, you can fill out this form. And just leave it at that. You don't need to engage with them. You don't need to have a full-on conversation with them. You are not going to change their mind. So don't attempt it. What can we do to help when those in leadership positions are too scared to approve displays or programming about LGBTQ+ issues or visibility, especially on Pride Month? Even a Pride mini flag at my desk had to be taken down. That is tricky. I would point them to the ALA Freedom of Information and Non-Discrimination Acts. That would be a really good way. Point them to Unite Against Book Bans. You've got the Rainbow Roundtable. You've got the Book Sanctuary. There's all sorts of resources out there that you can help to point leadership towards, even Gleason, to help them understand why all of this is important and that they're not alone, because we're seeing it across the entire country. Obviously, there's people here from all across the country. And it's not just in red states, it's happening in some blue states where they're getting pushback. You know, it's happening in purple states. It doesn't really matter. There's people out there that are trying to push to get material that they don't like out of their library. So you just need to rely on those resources. Just like if somebody comes in and they want to argue with you about a book and you hand them the form and be like, sorry you feel that way, fill this out and I'll make sure it gets to the right person. It's a lot of that same thing. Just kind of, you have these things in place to help, lean on them. That's what they're there for. How can we promote our library as a welcoming and safe place and hold events aimed at LGBTQIA+ youth in a way that doesn't create more hostility for these people or open them up to being targeted? And then it has, we are in a rural area. I am very familiar with rural areas and rural mindset. That's where I did my practicum, was in one. And there was definitely some pushback. If you have a lot of pushback, you can start by simply making the events inclusive as opposed to specifically aimed at LGBTQIA+ youth. Standing up for them, that's a good way. Shutting down harmful language when you're hearing it. These are all steps to create, just to start to create that environment. And so the more of that you do, where we don't use that language in here, you know, because even if there's not specifically a policy or a rule for your library about essentially hate speech, there are other policies and rules that you can lean on. Are they causing a disturbance to other patrons? That sort of thing. There's always one that you can kind of use that to help support standing up and supporting those that are being targeted. So I highly recommend leaning on those sorts of things to do that, but definitely making sure the language in your posters is inclusive rather than just being like boys and girls or put like kiddos, that sort of thing. Just be mindful of how you're promoting, what you're promoting, and where you're promoting even too. And By doing these little things that just kind of make it a welcome environment for everybody, then by proxy, you will be making it welcoming for LGBTQ youth. They're just gonna be folded in with the rest of it by creating this welcoming space. I mean, just as much as if you're creating a welcoming space for folks that are not English speaking folks, just by doing all of these different things that just make it a welcome space for everybody in general, you are then in turn creating this welcoming space for these kids. In the current political landscape, librarians are already being cast negatively for having LGBTQIA plus materials on their shelves. Of course, most parents are comfortable with their kids reading material with LGBTQIA plus characters, but may be resistant to the idea that their kids may identify as such. In a public library, what are our legal obligations, if any, to report what may be told in confidence to parents? There are absolutely no legal obligations to report what is told to you in confidence. The only time I would say anything is if the child is at risk of harming themselves or harming someone else, or if they are in turn being harmed. And in all of those cases, you can report that anonymously. As far as them saying something to you, coming out to you, any of that, you don't have to tell their parents about that. You are under no legal obligation to do that. You can have total plausible deniability even if you want, and just say, I don't remember that conversation. They never said anything like that to me. You're not being recorded. You're not being recorded having these conversations with these kids. I've had plenty of kids come out to me that haven't come out to their parents, that haven't come out to anybody in their family. There's no reason that I need to go and tell anybody else that their child is gay, that their child is bi, that their child is pan, that their child is asexual, that their child identifies as a different gender than they are being identified as at home by their parents. There are no legal obligations for us to have to do that. There's no reason that we would need to. That's a private conversation that we're having, and it's not harming anybody. Issues relate, this is more of a statement, so I think that they're looking for advice on this. Issues relating to trans safety in the US and how we can work as library workers to support our trans patrons and siblings. By creating those safe spaces and ensuring that harassment doesn't happen in the library. Just like you would not stand for harassment of any of your patrons for any other reason, don't stand for harassment based on their gender identity or their gender expression. Don't stand for it. It's harassment, period. Book challenges to LGBTQ books and clear points supporting why these books are necessary to the YA collection, especially to those who are very much set in their opinion. We had a challenge too. This book is gay last year, and while thankfully the patron did not push beyond losing our copy and receiving our response to their official challenge, it was hard to come up with a response when this person believed that this book shouldn't be available to anyone and that it is pushing, quote, fake gender science. Unfortunately, there's nothing that can be done. When they're set in their opinion, then there's no changing their mind. They're going to come in, they're going to check whatever it is out, and then they're going to lose it, and you're going to charge them for it. I mean, that's just kind of, if that's how they're going to play that game, then that's how they're going to play that game, and you're going to charge them, and then you'll just be buying that book again. So essentially, they are giving you money to buy that book again. And if they want to do that, all of your LGBTQ material, you just get newer copies. I mean, they're just refreshing your copies of these books. It's a pain in the butt, but honestly, there really isn't a way that you can engage with them on that. But what you don't want to do is do the work for them. And that is, oh, they keep stealing this book, and they keep checking this book out and losing this book. So we're not going to buy it. Well, don't do that, because then you're just doing the work for them. Make them work for it. If they don't want the book there, make them work for it. Don't do the job for them. Don't make it easier for them to censor what other people are seeing, because by the time it gets back on the shelf, somebody else may check it out that actually wants it and needs it. Or at the very least, they see it on the shelf, so then they know, hey, this library is inclusive. I'm welcome here in this space. They at least kind of understand me. Maybe somebody here does understand me. Had a question: has your library seen an increase in challenged books? We have. I don't know exact numbers on that because I'm not in the collection development portion, and that's where all of those challenges all go through. But we have seen an increase, and we're expecting to see a bigger increase. One of the issues that is currently facing a lot of places is that there are not just those lists out there of these are books that we don't agree with, and so then people are just like going and challenging or wanting books removed from their local school or their local library, just based because this book is in the list and they haven't even read it. So not only is there that list like that going out there, there's also now websites where they have synopsis of the book. So basically they can just copy and paste, whether they've read the book or not, what the issues are that they're contesting. And we can't do anything about that. All we can do about that is just keep fighting back however we can. And that is by pushing to hopefully get more people on these boards. If you know somebody that is outspoken about certain things, push like, hey, you should run for local government, because it all starts at the very, very local level. All the little tiny elections, those are the ones that matter before it ever even gets to state legislature. It all starts in these local ones, school boards, city, county council, all those sorts of things. Push for people that have sense and understanding about how kids need to be able to have access to books. Kids need to be able to have access to all of our history, not just select portions of our history. Encourage them to run yourself. I know it's already hard, but it would be really great to have more folks that are librarians or retired librarians in these places to help have a voice for the libraries, for the schools, on these boards, on these committees, on all of this, and in these positions of power in public office. We need more of those folks. We need more of you folks in those positions. So I highly encourage that. How can we advocate for trans youth when their parents do not approve of transgender identities? Recognize them when they're in your space and support them there. It seems like a very simple answer, because it is a very simple answer. That's what you do. You just recognize them. I see you. I recognize you for who you are. Regardless of whether your parents see you for who you are, I see you. I recognize you. And I support you. And by just talking to them and creating that safe space for them, that is how you are supporting them. And you can be an advocate for them by doing those things like showing up, at those meetings, speaking out, getting other people to speak out, voting, getting other people to vote. It really is a whole lot of just pushing. And I mean, you advocate by advocating. It's, which it sounds kind of weird, but I mean, that is one of the ways that you do it, is by showing up and causing good trouble. But especially by just creating that safe space for them. That's one of the biggest things you could possibly do for a kid, is just recognize them for who they are and be there for them. You know, I have a poster that I absolutely love that's just printed out and stuck by my desk. That's be the person you wish you had in your life when you were a kid. Do that. That's how you advocate for them. How do we get the youth to vote? 18 years old plus, and understand that a lot of issues they might be facing now or in the future are from the elected officials put in office now. Or even better, how can libraries encourage youth to want to serve in office and be the ones making those decisions? I love this question because I absolutely love the fact that there are more youth voting, and Generation Z is a very powerful generation. I don't know how many of you know about the BTS fans buying out all the tickets for one of the GOP I don't know, gatherings that they had. They bought like almost all of the seats, so they were all just empty, just as a protest. And I loved that. It was so amazing. It was absolutely amazing that they did that too. And it was just, I heard about that and I thought, that is fantastic. They are online in ways that most of us can't even grasp, and that a lot of the folks that are pushing to take away their rights definitely don't understand. And so what you can do is you can do programming, create programming specifically for teens around all things political. And you can do that even for those that aren't 18 yet, because that way they know before they even turn 18 the things that they can do. I'm not saying that you should do this, but I have told a number of teens in the past that, and I think I've said it this way, which is, I'm not saying you should do a walkout, but there are students and teenagers that have done walkouts as a protest. I'm not saying you should do that, but there are teens that have done that. They have a lot of power and they just don't know it. So by having these programs in which maybe you bring up the fact that there was a protest in which a whole bunch of students walked out of one of the Indiana schools and protest to anti-LGBTQ rhetoric that was going on within that school. And that was just this year. It's happening. And it's not just happening here, it's happening all around the country. So just engaging them in conversations and making them aware of some of these things that are happening, some of the ways that protests have happened, and how in a lot of ways you can cause that good trouble. And it is a lot of fun sometimes, and it's very effective, especially when it's the younger generation doing it. How far can/should a public library go in participating in community events planned for the LGBTQIA plus community? Are we choosing sides, quote unquote, if we have a booth at a pride type event? You're not choosing sides. not at all. But I say that because you should be at other events as well. Strawberry Festival, Asian Fest, Hispanic Heritage Month events that are going on. All of these things that happen throughout the year, not just Pride events, be at those, have a table at those. Because then you're not choosing sides. Well, you are choosing a side. You're choosing the side of being a welcoming space for everybody and all cultures, all languages, and all religions. So you're choosing the side of being good to everybody. So that is how you can also, when somebody says, you have a table at this Pride event. Well, yeah, we also had a table at the annual barbecue that is held every year by the local African American group in the park just down the street. We also had one at Summerfest. We also had one at the school. We also, if you're having them everywhere, then they can't target that because you're doing it for everybody. Is there such a thing as too much too soon? My library has previously not been very open about support for the LGBTQIA plus community, and some staff, with the best intentions, have suggested that it is at first better to be, for lack of a better word, subtler in order to ease in, since we live in a fairly conservative small town. That's honestly not a bad idea. It works better for some communities to ease into things. People tend to already think that and by I'm referring to the LGBTQ plus community, are trying to swoop in and take over. By jumping in full force right off, you could inadvertently strengthen that belief in them. Whether you intend to or not, you could end up doing that. So sometimes doing a slight ease in to things is the way to go. Because somebody walking into a branch that might not have had any Pride stuff up ever before, when they walk in and then there's suddenly flags all over the place and rainbows everywhere and all of that kind of stuff, it's gonna be like, what is going on? They're gonna freak out. So by doing it small and easing them in, a lot of times that is definitely the way to go. It really is. I mean, it kind of sucks because you do want to sort of jump in and do a lot of the things right off the bat and do all of these great things, but sometimes it just doesn't work like that. Okay, we're running low on time. I'm going to try and get through the rest of these questions really quick. I have a trans teen who has shared his chosen name and pronouns, he, they, with me. However, they frequently come to the library with their non-affirming parent who uses their dead name and misgenders them. Whenever I am with the teen one-on-one speaking about him to coworkers, I use his chosen name and pronouns, but I don't want to offend their mother and potentially get them in trouble when they come in together. How do I navigate this? In my own experience, I have navigated it by avoiding the child's name at all with the parent. Whenever they're around, I never use it. I hardly ever use the child's name with them around anyway, and I use they and them when talking about them to the parent. They really seem to like that book. I put the next book on order for them. I've addressed them when coming in before as, there's one of my favorite people, or there's one of my favorite human beings, kind of just in that lighthearted manner. So that is a way that you can do that, because then you are not doing it too, and you are also recognizing them with that gender neutral term. You can do that with everybody, honestly, even if they don't use they, them, because you can never go wrong with gender neutral. How do you promote your library as being the port in the storm for LGBTQIA plus youth when you're being accused of pushing an agenda and quote unquote lifestyle choice, which it isn't either of those things, by other teens or families in your service area? I weather it so the youth don't have to. I'll say things like, I have books on keto and deck building. I'm not pushing people to be on a diet or become a carpenter. We have the books for those that want and need them. If people don't want or need them, they don't have to read them. If you don't like mystery or romance novels, I'm not going to try and talk you into reading them, but they're there because other people like them and enjoy them. The only agenda that we push at the library is for people to read, hopefully as a family. So that is all of the questions that we had. And that took quite a bit longer. There's some other stuff there. These are some big signs that you can use in your area to kind of show things. These are some of the little signs that you can use, different pins and things like that, that just kind of help show that you are inclusive.
Thank you so much, Jayne. We did have one more question that you kind of addressed that someone just shared in the chat. Do you think you have time real quick to?
Yes, absolutely. I just
Thanks.
didn't want to, I wanted to be mindful of everybody else's time. So I was trying to like not run over if possible.
Oh, for sure. I think we're doing really well because it's 11:56
Okay, good.
by my clock.
Fantastic.
Let me see if I can find it. I will say thank you to everyone who's been sharing in the chat. We've had so much great just sharing amongst people who are attending today, also ideas and questions. Corvid wanted to know, we had protesters at our board meeting last week targeting an educational teen program for LGBTQ+, calling us groomers and immoral. How can we rally our community to show up for us? How can I bring up the positive aspects of this event?
That is a great question. And you can kind of do it the same way that you do with advertising those programs, like I was saying with like our drag story hour that we're doing with that soft marketing. Get it out there, reach out to your local ACLU, say, hey, you know what, we're having this thing, we're having all this pushback. Do you know people? Who can you put me in contact with to maybe have more people show up and talk about these things and to help support us? There are local organizations pretty much everywhere that you can definitely reach out to have those folks come in and do the talking. I would not reach outside of your county necessarily, because then the argument can be made, you don't even live here, that kind of thing. Because a lot of the folks that are doing this, all of this rhetoric about grooming and everything else like that, they're bringing people in from outside that don't live in these places to drum up all of this all these scare tactics and everything. So don't go that route, stay within here.
I want to recognize we've had some calls for people who are here today to stay in touch and to help kind of organize more national, I would assume, or even statewide discussions about this. Here in Indiana, we do have there are some folks who run a roundtable that is like a virtual roundtable for EDI, which I know is not specifically LGBTQ, but I think that is definitely a conversation that maybe people who are interested and in Indiana could join, just to have a support network. So if you are from Indiana and you're interested in that, you can email me and I can put you in touch with those folks who run that roundtable. So that's one way. But I want to thank Jayne so much for doing this presentation today and addressing all of those questions. And thank you to, if you're here and you submitted one of those questions, thank you. We really appreciate it. Or if you're watching the recording in the future.
If there's a question that you asked in the chat that I did not get to, and you want to get it to me so that I can try and answer it, I recommend the Yahoo email that I have there. Just put in the subject line something about, Indiana State Library question, or I don't know, something that will make me not just delete.
Or port in the storm or something.
Right, port in the storm would be great.
Okay, awesome. I'm going to stop the recording here, but if anyone wants to stay on for another minute or two.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.